Please tell me you're not doing a stupid podcast or something.
Hello, and welcome to Aces and Brills, a Dead Boy Detectives podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Ness. This is part 2 of the Case of Crystal Palace episode analysis. I am so excited to talk about this. Whenever I try and get my friends into Dead Boy Detectives, I will show them the trailer, and then I will show them the transition to this scene just because I love it so much. The scene that I love the most in episode 1 is the flashback scene
Yes!
to Edwin in 1916.
That's also one of my favorite scenes from the pilot, and especially since it's, like, the pilot episode, and that they're playing around with aspect ratios, or kind of, yeah, aspect ratios. They're playing around with, like, camera angles, especially, like, you know when Charles plucks Crystal from her mind and
Yes.
brings her back into the malt shop? That's very technical. And I really love how, like, the drag of the camera is so fluid and that everything is kind of like it's a very quick cut that
Yeah.
I barely see that, like, the change, and it's really fun, and I really wish that, and I'm gonna say this, that I really wish that they kind of kept that tone throughout, like, the entirety of the show, and I get that it's a pilot episode, but this felt, like, kind of darker, this felt more, you know, like it had a very lighthearted yet sinister vibes, it was very grounded in that, and with all of the, like, different technical things, like when, Edwin fell from a ceiling mirror down, and then when Charles kind of flopped, that's very comedic in a very, you know, action-paced way, and I really loved, like, how it also showed their personalities and how, all the mirror stuff was very fun, and I really wish that they could have done more with, like, the mirrors, because it feels like
Yeah.
after they established the mirrors as, like, this big thing for ghosts, they never really used it, especially when it was when they used it in the context of, within the town, like, when Edwin and I wanna talk about this more about, like, Edwin jumping in, coming out with, like, Becky's shoes.
Coming out.
It
Yeah.
he comes out so many times, oh my god. Um, but when it's established that they can, mirror jump within, like, the town of Port Townsend, I really wish they used that more, like, even in, like, a small way where they go and they try to, like, sneak around and they go to, like, the police station again to get evidence, for
Yeah.
the dragon's murder. Just small things. Small things.
I think I wanted to touch on it earlier, but when you talked about the fluidity of the camera, this is one of the things that like makes episode 1 one of my like best episodes for cinematography, because by using a fluid camera and having a fluid camera movement, you are telling a story through the cinematography. Um, but by telling the story through the cinematography, you are transporting the viewer into the world no matter what you do. And for the cinematography to be just so exact and so perfect on episode 1, it really allows the viewer to just jump in almost into it, like jumping into a mirror. It quite literally, the camera movement and the way the cinematography works, it just invites you in. There's no other way to put it. And by using the fluid camera movement throughout the entire episode, you're just transported on a journey. You are taken away to the world of the Sandman, to the world of Dead Boy Detectives, and you don't even have to think twice.
Yeah.
And I just love that.
I think my favorite thing too about the camera work is that they didn't use the Sandman aspect ratio that everyone likes to meme on. Because I swear to God, I think that's one of the best things the show did, even if, like, they didn't know it'd be on Netflix and it'd be, like, fully connected to Sandman. Very grateful that they did not squish the actors into the Sandman aspect ratio because oh my god.
Yeah, I've seen the memes.
Oh my god, they were so squished. My poor, like, oh my god, those poor actors. So squished.
If they're ever in,
God.
if they ever make a cameo in the Sandman, I'll mourn their faces.
They'll be so squished. When they make a cameo in the Sandman.
Sorry, yeah.
When. We gotta be delusional about it. We've gotta be delusional so it happens. If we're talking, I talked recently about Esther, right? But
Mhm.
I absolutely love her introduction. Like when she first comes
Yeah.
on screen, they first see her. It's not actually her talking, it's Charles talking about Esther, going, "Yeah, as a witch, she's a witch in a kind of like sexy way." And I love that. I love that even though that like the Esther will become the agency's biggest op,
Mhm.
Charles still very much is like, yeah, it's kind of attractive.
That that's also just Esther the character.
Yeah.
For her to be the villain in the first episode, because of like the intertitles and how they cut the actual episode in the editing, you think from first impressions that it'll be like, and from the titles that it'll be a case, an episode, and nothing else. They will like interconnect.
Yep.
But like each episode will have its own villain, and you think that that is what happens in episode 1, but it's not, because Esther always comes back.
I love how Esther, I love, love, love. My favorite thing about Esther is the fact that she is petty as hell. Like she got her child taken away, like child in quotation marks. Her mouse, I say like snake mouse. Dude, what
Mhm.
am I saying? She basically like her snake food got taken away from her. She's pissed.
Yeah, Becky Aspen.
Becky Aspen. Shout out Becky
Yeah.
Aspen. Hope you're doing all right. You're not real, but shout out you.
Shout out to Becky Aspen.
Shout out
Hope
to
you're doing
Becky
good,
Aspen.
Port Townsend.
But what's interesting is that she's very much like this I know what I'm doing, I'm a boss bitch kind of vibe, which is
Mhm.
really fun.
One of the things that I really want to talk about and that I absolutely love from this episode, it just makes me laugh every time I think about it. Becky Aspen's missing poster.
Has no actual information about her.
No information whatsoever. It just says she enjoys this. She enjoys this. I think it says she also enjoys swimming, which
Yeah,
is
what are they gonna
amazing.
do? Hey, Becky, there's a pool right here. Please, Becky, come here. There's a pool.
It's like you even get like a photo and you don't get any description of what she looks like.
You don't get where she was last seen. Like her parents, I feel so bad for her.
I kind of want to go back to Edwin's flashback scene
Yes,
because George Rexdu
love him.
talks. I love him.
Sorry, I have to say.
Yeah, just every time you mention a cast member, it's just like, I love him.
Before you talk about what
Love them.
George Rextrew said about Edwin, I will say what I love
Yes.
most about George Rextrew is that he loves Edwin as much as the fans love Edwin, and he has so much
Yes.
love and care for how Edwin is. Like he carefully curated his backstory, and I will say, in case you're not gonna say this, the fact that
Mhm.
George, in his mind, constructed Edwin's childhood and how that shaped him as a teenager, especially in the context of like he wasn't really given like love through his family, is very much indicative of how he then is treated, like how he treats, everything else in his world. Like he's very
Yeah.
much a he very much treats love as this thing that's really new for him, and that's got to be like like I love how he explores that too, like how he explores love and how he's very much, and again we'll talk about this in like Lighthouse Sleepers when we deep dive into that,
Mhm.
when he says I'm scared. I don't think he's scared that, Charles won't love him back. He's scared that he's never felt love, in this way. He's never like received love like that. And Charles is kind of like the first person who will immediately and instantaneously tell him, I love you, without any prompting, kind of.
Yes.
You know, it's very much, and you know, like if Charles as a person is not one to like go out and say his feelings outwardly, like he never once tells Crystal that he likes her. He's always flirting.
Mhm.
He's always skirting around the topic. He always goes in for the kiss. Um,
Yeah.
but for him to outright say, I love you to Edwin, that's an emotional, you know, emotional intimacy that he doesn't have with others, which is very interesting and
Yes.
it's very indicative of who those two are as people. And for Jaden and George to present it like that in such a vulnerable way is very interesting. And I've gotten off
Mhm.
topic. You talk about the flashback now.
Okay. I think every time we try and talk about it, we get distracted.
Well, we just love this show so much. This is
So,
good. This is good.
so flashback scene. George Rextrue mentioned in an interview that it was filmed at a abandoned mental asylum, and that whilst taking a break from filming, he would like go around
I
and like
saw
look.
that. I saw
Yeah,
that. I saw that interview. It's so insane that he felt so comfortable to just like walk around and like could be haunted insane asylum. I will say, like that's very baller.
yeah.
That's very ballsy. Shout out George Rextrue. If you're listening,
George
you're
Rextrue for
not.
going into a mental asylum where he was filming.
Shout out George Rextrue for like no, I saw this thing where it was a TikTok where this person who
Mhm,
works in the film industry was like, if you're an actor, basically they want to shepherd you into place so they always know where you are. And for George to just
mhm,
fully disregard the fact that he's very much probably in costume, probably in makeup, and probably has to shoot scenes to just walk around this dirty ass insane asylum.
This is the thing of like he's like walking around this like asylum, and there's obviously like a bunch of extras probably on set as well. So he's just like taking a moment to be like, you know what, I'm gonna explore.
Yeah, like, was there no handler for him? That's like the poor handler just like running around going, "Has anyone seen Mr. Extra? Has anyone seen George?" And George, meanwhile, is like 5 corridors down. Keep on George. No, I don't actually feel that bad. It's always nice to humble people. Just ask Jason
Mhm.
Reverie.
Are you trying to bully George as well as Jaden?
No, because I've done that before by accident.
Oh yeah, you did.
Oh, I did.
Um. Anyways, Edwin.
Edwin. Love Edwin. Love the autistic little
Oh,
Edwardian
man.
boy. He's so interesting. He's not my favorite character, but that's because I see too much of Crystal in him. Haha.
Mhm.
See, I'm twisting it around. Crystal haters all go, she's too much like Edwin. Edwin's too much like Crystal. I'm joking,
Uh-huh.
but he is one of my favorite characters. He's just not like my favorite character. He's very interesting, especially in
Mhm.
how like paranoid he is too. Like you can 100% see it. Like he's always
Yeah.
like kind of like skittish. He's always kind of like looking over his shoulder. He's very much. I feel like he's more aware of things, and I wonder if that has something to do with like the death scene. You know, like when he flashes back to his death. I feel like he's remembering how, being caught on guard, like unawares, is what killed him.
Mhm. Well, this is the thing. I've always watched like episode one like multiple times because I've
Mhm.
rewatched Dead by Detectives multiple times. But the whole flashback scene in general, like, is very well articulated from the transition, and the use of sound of the bell. Like, whenever I hear that bell, I'm like, oh, we're in the flashback. You see him walking down corridors and him being like very recluse and not good with people, as he does say in episode 7. But what's interesting is that Simon, didn't I didn't connect the dot the first time I actually watched it, because it's Simon who approaches him at his desk and then Edwin runs away. And I didn't connect the dots that it's the same boy who tries to approach him that then uses his brother's book to try and summon a demon to scare him.
Yeah.
But it's just, oh, it's like you hear them talking about it, and then there's that swipe edit of them like I don't even know where they are.
I think it's the basement.
Yeah.
I think it's been confirmed that they're in the basement of St. Hilarions. Like, I think it's also been confirmed that Charles was in the attic when he died. So
Yeah.
a comparison could be made from Edwin being in the basement, like down below the
Hell.
ground being hell, Charles up above heaven. He gets a nicer afterlife if he so
Mhm.
chooses to leave. So both of them are they're gonna be torn apart. Basically, like
Yeah.
that's kind of the symbolism there. I will also say with Simon, when I saw him in episode 7 tearing out the pages, I was like, "Who the hell is this?" And it took me
Uh-huh.
till he said once Edwin recognized him, I was like, "Oh yeah, it's the guy that killed him." I feel like Simon, and no hate to the actor, but I feel like Simon is kind of like forgettable as a person, but that's just because
Mhm.
I feel like he's tied to kind of Edwin's, repression of like his how he died and more of what happened after he died. He hasn't really
Mhm.
come to terms with like I wouldn't say like he hasn't come to terms, but he doesn't really think about how he died and like who killed him the same way I think like
Yeah.
Charles does. Like he very much internalizes, I feel like, the fact that it was friends that killed him, which is why he's always insisting that everyone likes him eventually, because it has to be true for him. And I really want to deep dive into Charles's character one day and have like that discussion kind of. But I
Yeah.
feel like, for Edwin, it's not that, I feel like he saw it coming in a way, you know? He
Mhm.
knew that it would if like something were to kill him at that school, it would have to be the boys.
Yeah.
I just think that he's way more traumatized by Help because, that's a roller coaster.
I think it's very interesting to draw the dynamics of the fact that Edwin's like last moments alive was him going to sleep,
Yeah,
and the last moments that Charles spent alive was him going to sleep. But they are completely different situations where
100%.
Edwin is not safe whatsoever. He is in a situation where he is in danger because of the boys that surround him. But then on the opposite side, when he escapes hell and when he finds Charles, he has this moment where he can change the course of someone's death, where they don't have to be afraid.
Yeah. That's also very indicative of, like, the character of Edwin, he's very honorable, which is how he was raised, and I really wanna do an episode we should do an episode where, we talk about, Edwardian and Victorian styles of, like, teachings, how that influenced, maybe Edwin's parents, how that influenced how he was raised, because it's very interesting to see how he was growing up and how, like, the culture was growing up and how, he kind of, like, defines that or how he's, like, a kind of, like, a product of his time, which is really interesting because
Yeah,
I feel like they did a lot of research, which is really interesting.
yeah,
I will also say that one of Edwin's last moments alive was him, like, screaming for him to be spared. Like,
yeah.
his innocence, and to quote Hosier, "Innocence died screaming." And that's very much him.
His screaming, like George Rexter, his acting just insane because even before I saw the first episode, I saw a tweet saying like George Rexter, you were born to play Edwin. Because he was. He was born to play Edwin.
He I will say, it's also, like, his acting, but also his appearance that really makes Edwin, I feel. Like, when I saw Edwin for the first time, I was like, "Yeah, that's like an Edwardian child." Because he very much reminds me Gregory Peck, like, very old Hollywood. He gives
Mhm.
off, like, a sort of old-timey charm to him. He very much looks like he was made for the silver screen, essentially. He was born in the wrong era. 100% he was born in the wrong era. His acting credit, I think I saw somewhere that he can tap dance.
Fact checking.
If we fact check if he actually can tap dance. I will say he is decorated as though he was trained like silver screen era because back then all of them were tap dancing theater kids.
Mhm.
Legitimately all of them.
Yeah, he can tap dance.
He can! I was right! I was right! He can fight, he can tap dance, he can sing, he can act. What can't he do? We are moving off topic off of the first episode. We keep going back to episode 7, and I think that's saying something about us.
I haven't finished talking about the flashbacks.
Oh my god. We are so off topic. I'm so sorry.
So it all stems from the idea of self-hatred.
Yeah.
Of the fact that Simon as a character cannot fathom the fact that he wants to be more than friends. It's quite relevant in the modern day to actually look at it,
Yeah.
because there is this idea of self-hatred within Simon and the fact that it goes to the extremes because it can.
Yeah. I will say also, part of it is also insecurity that Edwin kept walking away, and that's also very important to recognize.
But because he has got that level of self-insecurity, he then wants to give Edwin a scare, which in turn kills Edwin and also kills him himself. I am very interested to see, like, yes, there's Simon, but there's also all the other boys. Because, like, in the scene, it's obvious that Simon is the one who is leading it. Someone asks him, like, where he got the book, and he responds, "Oh, I got it from my brother," which is also, like, interesting too, because if he's also got this, like, male role model of his brother that he then wants to impress and steal his book from
Mhm.
to mock another boy is like an interesting take on masculinity within, like, 1916, within that era.
Yeah.
With Edwin's character, because he is from this repressed age of 1916 where it's like courting rules.
Back in the Edwardian era, there was courting, but most marriages, especially in the upper class, which we can assume Edwin is, because if not, he wouldn't be in school, because schooling was only up to 14 unless you were upper class. He would have been forced into a arranged marriage that would have secured power and land. So it's very much more repressed. It's old-timey to the extremes.
Yeah. So because he is from such a repressed era, then when he does go to hell and he experiences the horrors of hell, you can kind of almost infer from the fact that he spent 70 years in hell, he changed as a person in that time. And that's what I really want to see if there is when there is a season 2. Because it's just, was he being chased by the spider monster the entire time? Because he does say that he was passed
Yeah,
around.
he was kind of passed around. Because I find it really interesting that, like, Saul kind of, like, what made Saul give up Edwin in the first place? That's kind of also what I'm curious of. And who else was he given to? Like,
Yeah.
was it a trade? Like, was he a commodity? And, like, what does, like, how does that infect, like, the human psyche to be passed around like a plaything? That's not talked about because Edwin doesn't really think about it.
He is passed around as a plaything because the spider monster itself is toying with Edwin and his life, or and his death and his
I will say, we keep talking about episode 7. I think next podcast episode, we just need to talk about episode 7 and get it out of our system.
yeah. I love the flashback scene.
I love the flashback scene too. I want to talk about Monty. Monty the Crow.
Mhm.
Monty Finch. Esther Finch's familiar. And okay, so the introduction to Monty is kind of very, like, indicative of, like, who Monty becomes as a character, because very much he's in the background and he's kind of, like, brushed aside by characters, like how
Mhm.
Edwin kind of brushes away his confession, and he's very blunt with the "you're not who I'm in love with," which is so mean. Um
I wasn't talking about you.
yeah, like, the "I wasn't talking about you," like, Edwin, I almost smacked him. I wanted to reach in there and shake him and go, "That is not how you do it!"
I love that scene because when I first watched it, I paused it right before he talked and went, "He's not talking about you." Unpaused it and he just went, "I'm not talking about you," and I was like, "Fucking hell, he did it!"
Yeah, actually, I've not watched that scene to completion because I can't deal with how Joshua Colley looks utterly heartbroken when
Yeah.
Edwin says I wasn't talking about you. Because, oh,
If I had a nickel for every time that Joshua Colley's character confessed to someone and was rejected, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right?
imagine in Rise of Red that happens again.
He's just written. Whenever he gets cast, it's just written into the script.
It's always like he's like just a gay boy who always ends up not getting the guy. We there needs to be a rom-com. Again, getting back on topic. Monty as a crow very much is kind of foreshadows who Monty will become as a person, you know,
Mhm.
very kind of loud in a sense, but also like subdued, quiet background. Charles fully tells him to shut up the first time they interact. So I
Mhm.
don't blame Monty for completely brushing off Charles when they first met.
Mhm.
I felt like that was just desserts. Yeah, no, but I find Monty's introduction as a crow really interesting, and also how Esther, says like literally screams Monty,
Monty!
and then none of them later pick up that maybe the weird boy that they found is, kind of sus.
They found
Yeah, like they
they just
found.
found him on the street.
They did! Legitimately.
Well, that's the thing of the first time that Edwin, like, officially meets Monty in the 2nd episode. No,
Third.
3rd episode. Yeah. When he first, like, meets him, it's the fact that, like, Monty has all these books in his hand. He has all these books on astrology. He's just trying to learn about the world. He's trying to become a human. He's trying to learn about the world that he has been in for, like, probably several years, but finally gets to experience.
Yeah.
But then at the same time of experiencing the world and learning about astrology through the books, he then finds love in Edwin. And
Yeah.
he Joshua Colley's acting is insane because he probably I know this is very off topic, it's not episode 1, but his acting in that scene is just it's theatre kid acting because it's like it is over the top.
It's very
But why
expressive.
wouldn't he be? Yeah. Why wouldn't he be? He's experiencing life, human life, for the very first time.
Also, Joshua
And
Colley just looks like a crow come to life. I will be so for real with you. He looks like he was a crow familiar and he came to life. He has that vibe.
mhm,
I will also say, like, what's really funny with no one clocking that Monty shares a name with the crow at first is the fact that also I don't think Edwin and Charles, I think, were too busy worrying about the fact that they got hit with iron
mhm.
to properly register it. But it's still increasingly funny to think about, like, the first time that, like, Edwin's first kiss is with a crow that he 100% could have clocked with a crow way before the Cat King had to spell it out for him.
Let's move on. One of the last things that people have asked us to talk about is Edwin's breakdown scene near the end of episode 1.
The breakdown scene is great. I feel like it's one of the best monologues that, Dead Boy Detectives has inside of it.
Yeah. So Edwin's breakdown scene is amazing visually.
Mhm.
George Rexrue's acting is just amazing. It hits those spots, it hits those like little parts in your brain where you go, if you're having a breakdown, you're gonna have these moments.
Yeah.
Like where his voice cracks and
Yeah.
everything. But it's also his costume, the fact that they call it his like breakdown outfit, the
Yeah.
fact that he is unraveled himself, and they talk about that in the Tumblr interview.
Yeah. I wanna talk about his outfit in a different way too, in the fact that the only time we see him other than this, where he is this disheveled or he is this undressed, is in the office. So he's either has to be extremely comfortable or extremely in duress to actually do anything with his outfit, which is extremely interesting character-wise. I also wanna, like, shout out the line, "The police don't know what to do with a witch." That scream is very much giving frustrated. It's very much giving he's done. I feel like, and like not even talking about like if we're talking about headcanons or like, neurodivergent Edwin, at this point he's reached his breaking point for new experiences. And I feel like even if he's not neurodivergent, he's had this status quo for 30 years. He's not really the adventurous sort. If you look at like in the comics, there's one, it was like it's the manga one, they go to Chicago, where in the character bios it's only really Charles that is said to be adventurous. Edwin's idea of a good time is literally on going on a train and seeing where to go, and seeing the sky.
As he should.
He loves trains. I love that for him. He like his status quo has been broken. His only security for the past 30 years, over 100 that he's been dead.
Yeah.
And I think he's reached his tether with Crystal too, who he's been extremely hostile towards throughout this entire episode, who Crystal herself has been hostile towards. Like he's been like the vice versa. They're both bickering the entire time. Charles is slowly, kind of drifting away from Edwin to hang out with Crystal because Crystal is new and exciting. And I think Edwin is like he's losing Charles. He perceives he's losing Charles in my mind to Crystal. So he's kind of at this breaking point where I think he's kind of unsure if he's like, I don't think he's like mentally in a great place. But still, it's very interesting that like he's very carefully crafted.
Yeah.
And this is where all that goes.
He's very uptight. He's got this persona where he knows everything that's going to happen, and if he doesn't, he will figure it out. That's the whole idea of being a detective, of he will unravel the truth.
Yeah.
But when the truth is in itself complicated and difficult to understand, he breaks down. But one of the funniest side of things is this one of the scenes where George Rextrew has his wig.
It probably is. If we're looking at the video where he's putting on the wig, he is wearing the exact same outfit. There's no way that that's not the wig scene. And this is probably also a lesson for George Rextrew not to go and get buzz cuts right after filming.
Shout out to the costume and makeup team and wig team and everyone.
Oh my god. I do want to mention how the similarities between Edwin and Crystal, which we briefly mentioned, they both are very quick to kind of, well, I think it's Edwin who first starts hostilities because he's coming, like, this is out of his comfort zone. But fully, I think Crystal is quick to jump in on that. Like, they're both are having a sword fight right now with words, and they're trying to just hack each other to bits, which is very interesting. And also with the whole, like, we're talking about, like, backstories, too. Like, Crystal's backstory, like, that we get, you get bits and pieces of in episode 1, or any flashback she gets where she is not a nice person, and then it's revealed that she has absent parents who are also not nice people, very much ties into, like, probably like Edwin and how he grew up. Like, his parents were probably all like prim and proper and always showing, manners, courtesy, everything like that.
His parents weren't parents.
Yeah, his parents weren't parents. Crystal's parents weren't parents, and I feel like that sets them so close together that they're seeing a reflection of themselves within each other. And I don't think either of them like that.
Yeah.
Especially when the only buffer they have is Charles, who is not that great of a buffer.
I completely understand. One thing that I do want to talk about in the episode is Sassy Edwin.
Yes, Sassy Edwin.
George's line deliveries as Edwin is just amazing. It makes me smile, like, every time I think about how sassy he is, because it's almost like he is trying to replicate Crystal.
Yep.
He is trying to be snarky in the way that Crystal is being snarky towards him.
I also feel like his snarkiness too is like also like just an inherent character trait of his that he suppressed when he was alive.
Yeah.
Also when he's not when he's not around Crystal and like, trying to compete with her snarkiness, he very much also in the scene, "Does that look blue to you, Charles?" is also very snarky, very snippy, very sarcastic. He's very much My accent is awful.
Sounds amazing, but funny at the same time.
It is hilarious. Dude, I should just do we should do a whole podcast episode where you try a Canadian accent, I try
I can only do an American
you should
accent.
do a American accent, I should do a British accent, and that's how we do an entire podcast episode.
But yeah, I just love sassy Edwin. Shout out to George Rextrue.
Shout out yeah, 100% shout out George Rextrue.
Shout out Jaden Reverie too.
Yeah, shout out Jaden Reverie. Shout out Jaden Reverie, shout out George Rextrue, shout out Cassius Nelson. Oh, before we end, last thing
Mhm.
to talk about. Nico's establishing scene. Did anyone else think that was because
It's the start of a lesbian love story.
yeah, I thought that was gonna be it. I thought it was gonna be Crystal realizes that maybe she's not into guys, and maybe she's into this sparkly
Mhm.
lesbian.
But no, it was
No.
the dandelion
No, it was
sprites.
the dandelion sprites, and I hate them for it, 'cause that should just have been a thing she could do.
That's one thing I wanted to mention as well, mentioning the sprites. Even though they aren't well, they are apparent in the first episode. They're more apparent in the second episode because that is called The Case of the Dandelion Sprite. But I figured this out a couple days ago. I figured it out in the group chat.
Oh, yeah! It's so fun.
Because I looked at my comic and went, "Ah, the last names of the creators seem so familiar because it's Toby Litt and Mark Buckingham. And if you take the last parts of their names, which is Litt and Kingham, and you add a Y to the Litt, it's Litty and Kingham or Kingham and Litty. It's the sprites.
They're the
They named the
sprites.
sprites after the creators.
That's so fun.
And I hope to God that that is the Easter egg that the lovely co-showrunners has said we have missed. If not, I'll just appear daft.
You are aware of this podcast. Zach Ogle, I know you're also aware of this podcast. Zach, I know you follow this podcast. Tell us if we got the Easter egg, please.
And I would like ownership of the fact that I found it, please.
And I would like ownership as the person who helped platform this to a larger audience.
So, I think this brings our first episode, or
Our first
yeah.
official episode. That's not an
Our
introduction.
first official episode. So, thank you so much for listening to our podcast. Keep streaming Dead Boy Detectives on Netflix. You can follow our socials on Twitter and Tumblr, where we are acesandbrills, all underscore and all one word. On Instagram, we are acesandbrills_dbd. And if you are listening to this on Spotify, please follow us and give us a rating as it boosts Spotify's engagement. And if you are listening to this on YouTube, please like and subscribe to our channel. So, we have been Ness.
And we have been Laney.
And this has been Aces and Brills, a Dead Boy
Detectives
Detectives
podcast. And cut.